This video is sponsored by Game Toppers. Turn your own kitchen or dining room table into a premium portable game solution at a fraction of the cost. Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 750. Today we're going to talk about Messina 1347. This is a new game from the design team at Delicious Games, which is Vladimir Suchi, and he's co-designing this one with, try to get the name right, Raul Fernandez Aparicio. So Delicious Games is the original publishers over in Europe. Rio Grande Games is bringing it over to the States. This is an interesting game theme-wise. So if I had to try to sum it up in a terrible way, it's a Euro game. A lot of moving parts, a lot of mechanics. So if you love Euro games, you're probably going to like this. We'll get to the review part at the end. But the theme is interesting, kind of timely for now. Basically, there's been a plague in Messina, and what the players are doing is they're kind of coming back to the city, trying to get rid of the plague, get rid of the pandemic, if you will, and then try to reestablish and rebuild the economy, rebuild the town and all that kind of stuff, set up establishments, move people back into the city and so on. So it actually achieves that, little spoiler, through some very, very abstract means, but it does get there. So let's take a look at the table. I'll walk through the mechanics, then I'll come back and give you my thoughts at the end. Okay, got everything kind of set up here. There's basically three kind of main parts, and I actually got them all on the camera here. There's kind of three parts you're going to be interacting with. First, let's talk about the part up here at the top, and we'll go over this in some more detail in a minute, but this is obviously the score track there. You can see how you keep score going around. You have these three tracks here, which certain actions in the game are going to allow you to move up here, and these will kind of unlock new abilities, give you new workers and things like that that you can use to employ in the game. Here's kind of a round summary, which we'll look at in a minute, and then you have the turn order track up there. And if we zoom in just a little bit, there's some other little buildings and things like that that you can buy, little wagons and things like that that are going to come in useful. So that board's going to be up there. And then you have the main sort of city board. This represents the city, and this is made up of these hex tiles here. And this is somewhat randomized. This is what it'll look like at the start of the game, roughly. Over the course of the game, you might be adding, you will be adding new hex tiles based on this kind of like little stack of tiles that you will draw, which will randomly tell you where to put stuff out. And if we take a look at these, what these are little places where you can do kind of like worker placement actions. So if I move my worker here, I might have to put out the plague if there's a plague cube on that tile there. There might be some citizens here that I might have to rescue or recruit, if you will, and they'll be on top of that. If that'll focus, there we go. So that's how you will interact with that. So you might fight the plague, you might rescue and quarantine, or just recruit different types of workers, and you have a little worker placement action here. And then down here we'll tell you kind of like where to put plague pieces in certain pieces, and then here at the top you can see a cost there to sort of repopulate the city. So that's what these tiles are. And then you kind of have like your own player board here, which is made up of a few different things. So we can see here we've got like a bonus scoring little track there, and this is double-sided, as well as this board is double-sided as well. And each player will get their own board like so. What you're looking at here is the A side. There's a B side to both these two boards here, so they recommend that you play with the A side there. And then you've got spot here to put buildings, to put some of the different citizens in here, and then some of the other kind of work buildings over on the side there. So this is kind of your main sort of player board, and then you'll be interacting with everything again up here on the city. So now what's going to happen here is I'm not going to get too crazy with the mechanics because it would take kind of a while. The game isn't so bad to play, especially if you're familiar with any kind of medium to sort of heavy Euro game. This is right going to be in your wheelhouse here. So you have here the city. Every round you're going to flip over a new boat, and it's going to go into one of these kind of ports here. It's going to bring the plague with it. Each round here you're going to flip over, and it's going to tell you which port to put those in, and also where you might add a new city tile as well. And then what you're going to do here is you're going to rotate this wheel every round, like let's say we'll just do it there. So you're going to put plague tiles on any rats that are standing up and facing to the left. Whereas if we were over here, it'd be any of the rats that are sitting down facing to the right. So let's say we did that one. And so we would find these spots here. Let's take a look at the board. So for example, we have a nice little setup here of these three rats are facing to the left and standing up, and then you can kind of see that one at the upper right hand side of the frame there. So there we know that we would put in some of these plague counters here. So they're going to come in on these. Now the other thing to notice here are the colors on this. So you can see all the nuns are going to come in on the pink tiles here. So these two it's kind of pink, like magenta. And then so these will come in here. So we'll put some nuns there like this. And then we'll do the same for the other three types of workers here. So you've got the nun, the craftsman, and the nobility there. One thing to note here is you can see this nun came in. She's all by her lonesome, so she's safe from the plague in that case. This one, however, when you go to sort of rescue her, you're going to have to put her into quarantine because she existed alongside that plague cube there. Sort of around, you kind of seed the board with new citizens, new workers, and then new plague cubes that you've got to fight. And then what's going to happen is players are going to have workers in their color. And to start out the game, let's just zoom out a bit. You're going to take and put a worker out in a spot, and then you're going to take the action there. So in this case, I might collect a coin. So I get a coin there, and then I might get to activate what's called an overseer, which I'll talk about that. That's on your own personal board. And so this is the overseer for the nobles there. Or if I go here, we'll need to fight this plague token, and then I can rescue the nun there. Now to fight the plague token, you need these fire tokens here. And so you have these are sort of like called strength 1 fire tokens. Now later on in the game, you'll need strength 2 fire tokens. So these count as strength 2. They're still like 1 fire token. They don't count as 2 tokens. They count as like a strength 2. Think of it like that. So start the game off though, fairly easy to get rid of that. Just have to discard that. So we'll fight that. Every time you defeat the plague in such a way, you are going to progress up this track, and then you're going to get the reward. So you see in that case, I'm going to get a coin. Whereas if we zoom in just a little bit there, you can see actually if I defeat a second one, I can go up either of these 2 tracks there, because you can see those 2 books there, right there, are the same icons as what's above there. So you defeat 2 of them, and then it gives you a bump on one of these tracks here. And then eventually you might unlock a new worker as you go up there. And that worker that you get, you can use immediately that turn. Although it's going to increase the cost of something, what you can do is here you can spend 1 money per worker that you have unlocked. You can see that right down there, to advance one of these tracks as well. So at the start of the game, it's cheaper to kind of spend money to move up these tracks, which is possible on your turn. But as you get more workers and unlock them, it becomes more expensive. So it's kind of a balancing act when you want to start kind of pivoting in that way. And then just while we're looking at the top of the track here, you also see you unlock some other special abilities and so on. And then you start to get points at the end of the game. So you can see these point banners here at the top. So we've got these different points as you make your way further down the track there. And there'll be some other things that interact with these little ribbons here to get you extra points at the end of the game. But you'll get points for moving up the different tracks and so on. And the other thing to keep in mind, since we're on this board, is you can see the turn order there is defined in such a way. And that is going to be based on this chart over here. And you can see the left-hand side of this, there should be a little cube here. There it is. And the turn order is going to be defined by who is kind of the highest up on these different tracks. So at different times of the game, you're going to be going first, but not based on kind of the usual suspects. It's going to be based on these different mid-game conditions of where you're at. And it's also going to kind of define for you the outline here. So this tells you how to flip over the boats. This is going to tell you to add new tiles, add the new plague cubes, add the people, and then the strength required to defeat the plague. So you can see you only need the 1 power fire tokens here, whereas the double ones, you need those to fight the plague at the end to kind of stamp out that final part of the plague. And there's also a little indication here that we're going to swap out the buildings here. So these buildings, these kind of work buildings here at the top, you can see there's one in the middle there. You've got ones for each of the different types. So you can see here, this one is for the craftsmen, for the nobility, and so on. And then you've got a stack there in the back. Those are going to come out at the end in the last couple of rounds, because we'll talk about these in a minute. But they're kind of like, these are kind of ongoing benefits that you'll see there. And then the other ones will be immediate, because at the end of the game, you're not going to get much out of them. So it kind of switches them out, which is nice. So anyway, that's all kind of driven by some of this moving up the track and the turn order and all that kind of fun stuff. So again, as people start to put stuff out, so we'll just kind of do this. Now you got your first round done, right? And then what's going to happen is, now everybody's got workers out there. So the next round, what you can do is you can move to an adjacent spot, and then you'll just kind of lay your worker down to show that it's been used. And then that's how you're going to activate. So then now you're going to move around. Now to jump more than one space, you're going to have to pay a coin. And actually I did that in reverse. You want to lay them down at the end and then you pick them up and use them. It doesn't really matter. We've actually played it both ways, so just make sure you get it right. But yeah, so the trick is that you cannot use a hex that's already been used. So however you choose to indicate it, the rules say it's by standing up, so you lay everybody down and then move them so they're standing up, so nobody else can go and use there. But if I hadn't used this hex yet and you moved there before I was able to activate them, then you could do that just because there's a figure there. But if the hex has been used that round, this is the important part, then you can't reuse it again. So again, after you've got all the workers out there, you're just going to be moving them around back and forth. Again, if you get new workers, they're going to come from off the board in the first round that you get them, and then they'll have to start moving around there. And there are all kinds of different things here. So some of these spaces will allow you to move up the tracks directly. They'll get you fire tokens. They'll get you wood tokens here that you can spend to build some of these buildings that I showed you at the top, and all kinds of different things. What else is out here? Oh, one thing you can do here is you can actually upgrade your workers here. So you can see, so this is kind of, you get the noble there on that side, but then you might upgrade them to that side and they'll score you a point as well for doing that. So we talked about rescuing these workers. Now let's talk about where they will go on your board. Now when you rescue them, if they were in an area with a plague cube, you have to put them here in the quarantine hut where they're going to have to sit. Now you can build and buy buildings in here in these quarantine huts to actually give them the ability to do something. So these will provide you income on your turn. So they'll provide you, a fire token and a coin, or this one will provide you a victory point and a coin there. And then the next round, they're going to move one slot there, and then in the next round they'll come off, and then you can put them onto your sort of board here. This is where your overseers are. So this looks a little bit complicated. It's not too bad. So you have 3 overseers, and you can see they match the different types. So we have kind of the church area here with the nuns. So this is where you can put your nun workers, and then your craftsmen can go up here in these 2 areas, and your nobility over here. So once you either pull them out of quarantine, you can put them over here, or if you got them on a space that didn't have a plague token, you can put them directly into here. Now you can also build these buildings over here like this, and again these are for different types, and these are kind of the work buildings here. And so this one you need to have a craftsman or an upgraded craftsman, and this one for example needs an upgraded craftsman because you got the yellow side there. And so the cost here is on the left, and then you'll put these off to the side of your board there, and that's another spot you can put your workers there. So let's take a look at what happens when you activate an overseer. So let's say we activated our nobility here, so we'll take the noble one and we'll move it here. So this allows us to activate either of these 2 spots that it's connected to, but you need to have the right citizen in there. So in this case we'd move it up here. We don't really have a choice because we don't have citizens in both spots. So this allows us to upgrade any of the other citizens we have anywhere on our boards or any of the buildings. So maybe we'll just upgrade this guy just for fun. So we did that. Now, next time you activate this overseer, you're going to have to make a choice to go this way or this way. And when you get this spot, you can activate any of the pieces in there, any of these 3 spots. And then the same with this one. Now you can upgrade your overseer, and this will allow you to do the thing twice. So if I go in here, I can activate any 2 of these spots here, and same here. If I get all the way to here, then I can do something on this side and even something in an unrelated side. If it's the double, if you've doubled your overseer, you can do 2 on this side and 1 on this side. It's a little special rule. And then once you get all the way back home, you can activate any 3 citizens anywhere that you wish there. So that's a good way to do the loop. And so it's kind of an interesting little sort of oddball tech tree here. We can kind of go left or right on each of these things, and you try to get them around and sort of bunch them up together so that, when you get the middle part, you're activating both sides. It's a fun little puzzle there. Finally, while we're looking at our player board here, I want to show you one other thing here. So again, you have these bonuses here, and these are going to be asymmetrical. So there's different ones for each of these. So if you can have the number of buildings here that you've collected, the number of boats you've collected, and a number of these markers that you've put out, which I'll talk about in a minute. And so you're going to have a number of those, and you're going to take actions to raise your multiplier here. Let's see, I had an example here. Here we go. So anytime you take an action with the scroll here, you can increase one of your multipliers on there. And so this kind of gives you an end game strategy to go forward with this little widget here. And then there's kind of one final action that you can do here on the main board. Let's take a look. So once you have purchased, actually let's zoom up a little bit here. Let's go whoop over here. You can see those wagons there at the top. Okay, so you can see they cost different amount of resources here, like so. And then so you can see this one has, it costs you gold and then 2 wood, and you get 6 points for that at the end of the game. And these are stacked up in a certain order as well. So on your turn, instead of activating a spot and moving to that spot to use it for its ability, in this case to move up that track, what I can do is I can move there, pay this cost, in this case it would be a coin, and I have to spend workers from either one of my work buildings or my city with the overseers, and spend those 2 types of workers, and then flip over, kind of like tap my wagon, which I can unflip at the end of the round to use again, to put out one of my population markers. And then I'll score 8 points in that case. And that's really all the game is moving your workers around on this board up here, and then you won't be repopulating really in the first probably 3-4 rounds, but definitely in the last 2 rounds you can start to repopulate there. You want to have gotten some wagons to do that, because that's some big points. You can see a lot of these are worth a lot of points there. So let's walk through, there's a player that players will get. Let's walk through kind of the end game scoring here, and we'll walk through just so you have an idea of how to win. Now, the one thing it shows here is rats, which I didn't mention. It doesn't happen too much. I've seen it happen once in a while, but as players learn the game, it happens less and less. If you go to a place with a plague cube and you fight the plague there, and there are any plague cubes left after you're done fighting, you can take a rat. So for each rat that you have, you're going to move back down the fire track on the main board. You're going to lose that many spots. You're also going to lose a certain number of points based on the number of rats that you have. So you can have 1 to be okay. And then you're going to get the points for how far along different tracks you are, score your scrolls, which is your end game bonuses, right, what you see there, and then score your points for your population. For every 3 of these things in any combination, you get a point, and then whoever has the most population tokens on the board gets 10, second 7, third 3, and so on. And that's it. Okay, so that is Messina 1347. We'll walk through my 3 pillars of review here. We'll talk about player count. I have played this at all player counts. It plays 1 to 4 players. Not sure I mentioned that at the beginning. I would say didn't really like solo. It was all right. It was a good way to kind of learn the game. I had played it, I think, a 3-player game the first time I played it, and then I played it solo to kind of like, you know, teach myself a little bit more, because the first time you play it, at least for me, it was a little bit overwhelming. It's kind of abstract in terms of like, you know, what's a good idea to do, which I'll talk about in a minute. There's a lot of things going on. You're trying to build buildings, fight the plague, recruit citizens, use that funky overseer board, and all that kind of stuff. So it works pretty easy, right? You know, take a worker placement thing, do the stuff. Easy enough. But it's hard to figure out what to do and why to do it. So this single player game was kind of a good way to learn that, but not really that interesting. It reminded me a lot of another Suchi design, the Praga, where you kind of flip over these tiles and it kind of drives the AI. I liked Praga a little bit more, honestly, solo than this game. But at the other player counts, I really liked all the other player counts, 2, 3, and 4. It didn't feel too much different. I'm going to say there's a little bit more kind of blocking and stuff with the worker placement, but I could play it either way. 2, 3, or 4 is fine. It didn't seem to take too much longer. Let's see what the actual time on the box says. 60 to 140. That seems about right, because you can definitely play this as a 2-player game in about an hour, or even in a solo game in about an hour. Once you get to 4 players, because there's a lot going on, there's a lot to consider. It's not too complex, I don't think. I think it's a little bit abstract, but I don't think the complexity is there. And so 140 is a little over 2 hours. And I think that's a fair assessment. I wasn't keeping a clock, honestly, when I was playing it. But last time I played it was 4-player, actually. I think it probably took us not quite 2 hours. But I think there was only 2 of us had played it a few times, and 2 of us were new. But, you know, it's a group of folks that play lots of games, so it wasn't too bad that way. Yeah, so that seems about right for the playtime. And now, as far as what is this game like, I don't really know. I mean, it does remind me of Praga a bit, which is kind of like Vladimir Suchi's game from the year before. And it's very abstract. Praga's very abstract. This comes together theme-wise more than Praga does for me. I would say Praga is probably, I don't want to just compare it to Praga the whole time, but Praga's probably seems more of a clever design to me, because if you've not played Praga, I don't know how to say the rest of it, I just call it Praga de Regni or something like that. I did a review for it. It has this crazy wheel thing that's just super, super neat. It's just a really cool thing. And you know, kind of march your workers down, and then you go up this thing, and you can kind of go up these cathedral steps at the end, and it's just a really funky, bizarre, just real clever design. It's fun pleasure to play. But the theme, like, just checks out, you know, like pretty quickly. And it's one that I've played recently and still enjoy. I do like this one better than Praga. It doesn't quite look as good, I guess. But the theme of this really comes in. And the reason it comes in is because of the arc of the game for me. Because at the beginning of the game, you're really kind of focused on fighting back the plague and kind of cobbling together your recruits and getting some buildings and kind of getting your economic engine started. But kind of midway through the game, you start to pivot from fighting back the plague to really focusing on your industry, and then you start to switch to actually repopulating the city and using some of those resources that you've gathered up to go in and kind of send people back home, send them back to work and all that kind of stuff. And so I like that the arc of that is you have the real kind of focused approach to fighting the disease at the beginning, and then kind of shifting gears and moving back into sort of we'll call it an everyday kind of normal life, or there's a vibrant economy going on. And the game really kind of sells that to me. Again, through a lot of kind of very abstract things. One thing that's interesting though about this is you have kind of the physical space of the city, which is cool. I like how the worker placement is proximal. You know, you have to move adjacent to your spot, and so there's some kind of spatial stuff there. So that kind of, just that little bit of spatial stuff kind of adds to a little bit of the theme there. And then you have this real funky overseer board thing, which is really kind of a fun puzzle to play with. It feels like a very kind of managerial, logistical kind of vibe. So you have that kind of part of it. And you have kind of those, kind of sort of the tug of war between kind of the different sort of classes of folks, you know, the different sort of roles that people play in the society. So you've got the clergy, the nuns, and the craftsmen, the nobility, and stuff like that. And so you've got to kind of use them in different ways. I will say the theme kind of breaks down a little bit, because based on some of the bonuses and stuff, it's like, well, I'm getting this bonus from a nun and not a craftsman. That's, I mean, if I want to nitpick and stuff, I can do that. It doesn't really matter to me, because you have really kind of a fine-tuned, well-oiled machine in terms of the mechanics and the competitiveness side of it, and the resource management and all that stuff. So any kind of, you know, stumble slightly with the theme there is fine, you know. And there's no reason to say that the church didn't help out with this other thing, and then, you know, there's some cooperation there that's kind of hidden under those abstract layers. I feel like I'm trying to make excuses here. I'm not. But I say the general arc of the game, fight the plague, start to pivot, start to repopulate. That's really cool. I really like that, and it's timely because we've just gone through this pandemic and stuff. And it's cool. I like that. It's historical. It gives me a good feeling, you know, because I don't know if this is intended or whatever. It's just kind of a personal thought. It's like, hey, we kind of been through that, where we went through the pandemic. We're, you know, for better or worse, or however you want to look at it, we're trying to get our way out of it. And then, you know, trying to get things back to normal where we can kind of exist in a kind of a normal way, a vibrant way, right? And so to see this kind of setting back here is historical. It's 1347, so this is, you know, 1,000 years ago, not quite, but, you know, several hundred years ago. And the folks here in Messina and lots of other places around the world through these periods of time have had to deal with just Mother Nature coming and like swiping you across the face and taking you out of your rhythm, you know, and taking you out of your expectation of comfort and survivability and all that kind of thing. So I really like this for that. I think that by itself, even though it's abstract, right? We're not really dealing with the daily lives and kind of the personal problems of the people during this kind of period, right? And some of that is probably more important, you know. You know, and I don't mean this to sound fuzzy or anything, but it's like we're not dealing with the mental health of the people and sort of the emotional state and the well-being of people going through the Black Plague. I mean, which is horrendous. You know, we're not dealing with it at that level, and that's a lot of times how you have to deal with it at that level as a person. But being able to step back away from it, you know, 700 years later, is interesting to kind of look at this and look at the kind of the logistical part. And it's not, again, it's not like concrete, and we're not talking about the logistics of the time and all those kind of simulational types of aspects. Everything's abstracted, everything's kind of removed a little bit. You're only dealing with things on kind of a real fundamental philosophical level of kind of managing the space of the city, managing sort of an abstract logistical board. But for me, I really liked that, and I really appreciated that, and it gave me a good feeling every time I played it, because again, you're successful at the end of it. Even if you didn't win the game, sort of collectively as a group of players, you've cleared the city out of the plague, and then you've started to rebuild the economy, and some people did better than others. Okay, so I really like it for that, and I found it honestly a little bit therapeutic for that. So that was cool, and sometimes I think abstraction is good, because I don't have to get in the muck and the mire. I don't have to be faced with the actual reality of the thing. I needed time to step back, but I'm still kind of dealing with it. I'm still kind of dealing with just things at that real sort of synaptical level of putting together this puzzle and trying to solve it and get through it. And it's fun and it's competitive, and you know, we've had a good time playing it, and it kind of pushes and pulls on all those kind of Euro-y kind of mechanical buttons at the same time. So that's a really good kind of bonus feature there. So Messina 1347, really enjoyed it, definitely recommend it. It's one of my favorite Suchi designs. You know, I still have Underwater Cities. That's the one that I keep going back to. I've been playing it a lot, especially during this pandemic. The solo mode for that is really good. This one I'd put right up there. I think Underwater Cities is my favorite, then Last Will. This would probably be like a number 3 right there. I haven't played Last Will in a while. I really like Last Will. The one I haven't played, there's one I haven't played here because it's a Pulsar or something or other. I still haven't played that one. I played just about all his other ones though. So this would definitely be in that top 3, but I haven't played Pulsar. Everybody's like, that's his best one. Okay, well, anyway, this is good. Thanks.